Hello and welcome back to Wisdom Work with Christa and Christy. We are so happy to have you here. I have my beautiful co-host, Christy McCaffrey, with us. Say hi, Chris.
Hello, everyone. So happy to be here today. How are you, Christa?
So good. And today we are talking about shedding layers of ourselves and just change and evolution and growth and healing and normalizing all that comes with that. So to start us off today, I wanted to read to you something that I found when I was doing my sacred start one morning, probably one of the mornings we had decided to do this topic, Chris, because it never surprises me that we always get signs of validation. So this one I pulled, and the title of the card was "You Are Unfolding." So I just wanted to read us this to start us off and to just kind of put in context what we'll be discussing today. So it goes like this. You are always unfolding, changing and transforming, blossoming and withering, just like the flowers. All of nature is expanding and contracting constantly, an endless cycle of death and rebirth. We often get so caught up by focusing on our goals and destinations that we dismiss the beauty of our growing process, often bypassing or resisting our natural cycles of creation. You don't have to force your healing or resist or fear your changes. You are naturally healing always, and you are always growing in your own rhythm according to the natural flow of divine timing. So I just want to stop there because I think this was so powerful for me, especially with my personality of going, and trying to, I'm recovering as a person that hustles for my worthiness and just trying to sink into the peace that is within me and the work that it takes to take on that, the quiet and the rituals to get into that space. So Chris, I'd love to hear from you. What is your perspective on unfolding or shedding layers or changing, healing, and evolving?
Well, I love what you just read for us. I think that was such a great way to kick off this conversation. And I like how it spoke to resisting and forcing,
Mm,
because I think that many of us do either or both of those things quite frequently in our daily lives, right? And especially when we're thinking of what we want in terms of our future, or you're eager to get to a point, the next point on your path, that we can sometimes really force things too much,
mhm,
or we're looking forward to that next place, but we're afraid to let go of what's comfortable for us. And so in that way, we're resisting. And
mhm,
so I think that the shedding of layers or the unfolding is something that I've come to find is such a necessary, vital component of personal growth,
mhm,
that you really can't grow or evolve if you're not willing to constantly be unfolding. And if
mhm,
you don't get comfortable with change, you're not going to grow. And that is unfortunately a really big hurdle for a lot of people, is that nobody likes change. It's scary. And we've all become very accustomed to certain habits, ways of thinking, ways of being that we think feel comfortable only because we've gotten so used to them,
mhm,
right? But if you look a little more closely, you can maybe be honest with yourself and see that some of the habits that you have, or the mindsets that you have adopted throughout your life, maybe aren't serving you to the highest degree, especially if you can be honest with yourself and see that they might be holding you back in some way, the ways that you perceive things, or just your fear of growth and change alone can be completely keeping you in place.
mhm,
So for me, I don't know when it clicked necessarily in my personal growth journey, where I realized, oh, okay, this isn't like I'm just going to shed some old stuff and then I'm this new person and I go forward as this new person forever and ever. That actually what happens is you have to continually commit to the shedding process. And when that finally did click for me, though, is when I was able to really own and understand the fact that by shedding, whatever isn't serving me anymore, I'm allowing myself to get closer and closer to that ultimate feeling of inner peace that I truly want more than anything now. Like, I have learned how to really prioritize inner peace, because with each layer that I've shed of anything that was old, either it be old ways of seeing things, old habits that were holding me back, old ways of perceiving myself, right? We talk about that a lot, about who you just spoke to it yourself, that you're, what did you say? You're a recovering,
Just like chasing the goal and the
yeah.
hustle.
And so am I. And we talk about
Mhm,
that a lot, is
mhm,
that we defined ourselves by that for many, many years. You know, it was like, I'm proud of the fact that I'm someone who doesn't stop doing things, and I'm
mhm,
always working for something more and something greater and something better. But what neither of us realized back then, when we were so caught in it, was that we were holding ourselves back because we were trying to force things. And we needed to do our own work to come to the conclusion that we needed to shed that part of ourselves in order to step more fully into this natural flow and allow life to unfold as it should, instead of us forcing it to be what we wanted it to be. And so, to me, I think that's a really important part of the conversation today, is taking a really honest look at, what are you forcing, or what are you maybe restricting yourself from, um, or what are just some ways of being that you might be holding so tightly to because you're afraid of change. But let's talk about what comes when you're willing to change, what comes when you're willing to kind of like let this natural unfolding happen. So
mm.
tell me, Chris, what does it mean to you when we talk about the unfolding, and what does it mean to you when we talk about shedding layers, and what is it that we need to let go of, to find that inner peace, in your opinion?
Mm. Well, you just gave us a lot to think about. I loved every piece of what you said because I got so many visuals from your talk just now. So thinking about the unlayering and the shedding and the evolving, I keep thinking about a trapeze artist, like going from one bar and then there's that brief release where they're just free flying and they're hoping that that other bar is right there, like that they can grab onto. And there's this deep fear and faith that needs to be present. And it can be very, very scary and really heart-wrenching to think about, what if I fall? What if I'm not, what if that bar isn't there to catch me? Or what if that net isn't there? There's this risk of feeling like you're dying almost. And it's scary. It's really scary. So I think for me, it's I just keep thinking of motherhood because that just broke me open. And I remember talking to a dear friend after I had Damon, saying like, I can't reach who I used to be. Like I can't even touch her anymore. I don't know, like everything seems so blurred and so shattered. And she said, you didn't lose that piece of you. Your heart broke and expanded. So it's expanding into something new and something more. And like you said, there's so much more room, there's so much more opportunity, there's so much more clearing in order to receive the abundance that we're all meant for when we release that grip. Because for me, like control is a big thing still. And I think it's so nice to have little tidy boxes in my life and control on everything and everyone. And if they just act a certain way, I can love them, but they don't. And so I have to work on myself because the triggers are our teachers, and understanding that life isn't perfect. It's not supposed to be. It's supposed to be super messy. And as Glennon Doyle says, brutal and beautiful. And we have to be the dancers. We have to be the ones flowing with it and evolving with the moment and being able to, for me, parent my little child inside of me and to say, it's okay, Christa, I know you're scared, but I'm here and I got you. And having that voice of a parent. And that's the gift that Damon gave me, was that parental voice of unconditional love that I have to give to myself. And I have to remember that more, because it comes much more easily to Damon because he's this beautiful being in my life. But when I do it for myself or even my husband and look at ourselves as if we're a little child, little children that are just innocent and wanting to be loved and wanting that belonging and wanting that deep connection, it's really important for me to remember that, when I'm triggered or when my heart feels like it's breaking or that I feel betrayed or I feel angry, that it's not a bad thing. It's part of the process. And I used to view it as something so negative, but now I've been schooled enough in the universal school of life, the classroom of life, which is just, daily living. And it's like when tough stuff comes up or big triggers happen, it's like, okay, got to get my spiritual armor on and be a warrior, bring it on, life. And let's use these healthy tools to navigate this turmoil, because we know from past experiences that it ends up being way better on the other side when we go through it, as opposed to sitting on the sidelines and waiting for it to pass, because either way is an option.
Yeah. And there's two things that I want to mention here. And I'm really glad that you brought up the, kind of parenting your inner child, because I've been recently reading Gabrielle Bernstein's newest book, Happy Days.
Mm,
And she talks a lot about IFS, which is the internal
yes.
family system.
Yep.
And it's kind of something that I had touched on, I guess, in like my, reading or, hearing that type of description on podcasts, or I think, even you've talked about it, but to dive a little bit deeper into it, she talks about the self, and the self being the higher part of yourself that it's actually always in calm, like in a calm place, right? It does actually have all the answers. But then you've got all these, she calls them exiled parts of yourself that really are kind of tied to a lot of trauma that we had through growing up and through our adolescence, and trauma being things you would perceive as little, but added up over time have really left this heavy weight inside of you. And it's caused fear. It's caused reactions of basically this inner child just gets defensive and puts its walls up, and reacts because it feels threatened. Right. And she kind of coaches you through, and I think I don't want to speak too much on this topic because I'm definitely not an expert on it, but what I took from what I was reading about it, I was just reading last night, was that we can get to a place where, and I think this is what you're talking about, Christa, where your higher self is talking more compassionately to these like wounded parts of yourself, and or just talking to the part of yourself that's super scared of change or really scared to become anything other than what you've come to know yourself as. I mean, I think that's part of it, is that it's so scary to think, but if I change and grow in any way, what's everyone in my life going to think of me? Or who am I going to be then? And that's so scary, right? Because we've just become so comfortable. Even if it's painful, we're comfortable in that pain. And it's so scary to think of changing. But the second thing that came to mind for me was I was talking to a listener, actually one of our listeners, who had asked me about the conversation of when you start to make these changes and you start to get on that personal growth path and you make that decision, how do you deal with the fact that the majority of the people in your life are not necessarily also stepping onto a personal growth journey at the same time, right? Or that you're talking about these things and they don't even understand what you're saying, and kind of makes you feel a little lonely. And I can totally relate to that. And I want to speak to that because I think you and I both, thank God, had each other to talk through these kind of things over the years. But there were many times that I felt super lonely in my personal growth because I felt like a weirdo, like nobody else around me was doing it. And God forbid I talk about it, it certainly wouldn't make sense. But the advice that I gave to her, and it's what I've come to find to be really true for myself, and I hope this serves other people to hear this, is that you really, if you decide to do this personal growth work, and you decide to change or shed some layers or just kind of start that evolution process, please remind yourself that you're doing this for your own inner peace. You are doing this so that you in yourself can find a way to be more calm, level-headed, even keeled. It's all about creating a better experience for yourself in this life, a clearer experience, and more clear-minded and more freedom, more personal freedom for yourself. But you also have to acknowledge that everyone else around you is going to come to that realization on their own time. For you, it might be at 32. For somebody else, it might be at 62,
Mhm.
and that, or some people may never really come to a point where they want to do this, and that's fine too. But you have to let people be on their own path, in their own lane, and not resent them for not wanting to be in the same mind space, headspace as you, or on the same journey as you. Um, and yes, it can feel lonely, but then you need to reach out to find your community. And that is ultimately what I told her as well, is that that's why this community exists.
Mhm.
We did this so that people can feel seen and heard and validated through these conversations, and that you can know if you're stepping on this personal growth path and it piques your interest, or maybe you're far into it, or wherever you are on your own path, just know that, like, we're here with you. We're walking alongside you. We really care to support you. Send us an email, send us a DM on Instagram. Like, we want to be that for you. And I think where people get tripped up sometimes is that they think to themselves, the people that are closest to me should know this. If I'm
Mm.
going through something so transformative, then the people that are closest to me, I need them on that journey with me. However, the caveat here is that that kind of becomes a hindrance. That can become a major block and issue for you on your personal growth journey if you think that you have to do it simultaneously with everyone around you. Because I don't know, it really is. It's going to hold you back. This is
Mhm.
such a personal journey. It doesn't mean that you can't share it with people, but I think the greatest piece of advice I could give people is share it with the right people.
Mm.
Share it with a community that understands what you're trying to do, understands where you're coming from, and number one key important message here is that they support you.
Yeah.
Because if you have people around you who this isn't even on their radar, again, don't judge them for that. That's fine. But they're probably going to shut you down and
Mhm.
emotionally, and they're going to make you feel like whatever you're trying to do doesn't make sense, or that's weird, or that's, and then that
Mhm.
could stunt your growth.
Yep.
So I just wanted to point out those two things as you were talking about the internal family system, and then also just this important point of remembering that this is your own work to do, but find your community, and
Mhm.
don't let you yourself be held back from potentially what the people closest to you may or may not be doing in their own personal growth.
Such great points, Chris, because that was one of the biggest heartbreaks that I had to realize is it wasn't happening to everybody else around me. And that voice of others that we always talk about, the boo, it's it's really powerful. Like, and I had to reconcile that within myself over and over and over in many, many situations of, okay, the voice in my head, I can identify whose it is. And do I crave that life that they have? So I had to deconstruct what was actually going on internally with me, because as I was growing and growing and growing, it's a good thing, but it's also really heartbreaking because relationships will come and go. And for me, as an Italian American, like, family is everything is what we were told. And it's like, well, it has to make sure, like you said, it doesn't have to be that they agree with you, but it has to be that they support you, because they may not understand it. They may not feel aligned with that at that moment in their life, the way you're doing it in your life. And it can also mean different paths. Like, it could both be growth, but it could be, like you say, personal growth. I say spiritual journey. So it's like same, but just different words. And I think words
Yeah.
are really important, and words are a great way to identify what's happening internally for those that want and have earned the right to hear your story. As Brene Brown says, like, don't share your story unless somebody has earned the right to hear it. And I think that's
Yes.
yeah, that's
Yes.
really important. And that shows self-respect. Like, you're not abandoning yourself by just blurting out the most vulnerable, hard inner work that you're doing to anybody that will listen. It's those people that you've hand selected, and it doesn't have to be a lot. It just has to be those meaningful, soulful connections that, whether or not they speak your same language, whether it's, spiritual language, personal growth language, or whatever, it's that they see you and they witness you in your growth. That's all. And I think that's our call to action collectively right now. We are unbelievably divided, not only as a country, but there's just so much happening with just systems crumbling around us all over the place. So how do we hold all people in love? How do we hold all ideals and all perspectives in kindness and with respect? I think that is a big call to action, and we can't do that unless we do that with ourselves first, unless we do that internally to reconcile the push-pull within all of us that happens on a daily basis. I'm guessing, at least it does to me, in all different areas of our lives. So it's a matter of just, for me, it was really changing that internal voice from what it used to be, which is a really big self-critic. And believe me, that's still there to keeping me in check, but it's also being challenged by love. And I think that's the beautiful, kind of like the yin yang and the head and the heart. It's like they say the most challenging journey, or the longest journey of one's life, is from your head to your heart. And I think this work, whatever you call it, is so important in coming into your heart space and coming into that love that you have, hopefully for yourself first, and using yourself as your guinea pig with this work, and holding all those parts. Like you said, what did you call it? What Gabby B said? The exiled
parts of yourself. Yeah.
So that's one term, the exiled parts of you, inner child that has been left, by little capital T trauma or little t trauma, where they're just being, left alone, and they're super scared, but they're in your heart and they're still there with you. So it's just like you would do any crying baby, just hold that baby with love and soothe the baby and soothe your inner self, whatever that means to you. Like, it could just mean like an actual hug, like holding yourself, or getting a massage, or going for a walk in nature, whatever the self-care practices are that really nourish you and soothe you. Put that into your daily practice often, especially as you're healing, because I think that's really for me, it was a really important part of my healing journey, because it's so tumultuous and it feels like you're literally at war internally in your mind and in your heart, and just trying to figure out, like, what is my next move? Like, what is my path? Like, what? And I always ask for signs. I pray for signs, and I usually get very obvious ones, because I always say, please give me obvious ones. I'm a little dense, so be clear with what you want me to do. So I get them, and it's so cool to see that dialogue with, like, things we can't see, so whatever you call it, but it's just like, it's amazing. So again, I think when you wake up to wanting this, and I think most of our listeners are, woken up to this either personal growth or spiritual journey, like, you want more. It's addicting almost. Like, you want to, that's probably not the right word, but it's like, it's contagious. It's like, okay, I've gotten a little of this and I feel the expansion, and now I want more. But like you said, Chris, the caveat is, with every expansion comes contraction. So you're going to feel this, like, I'm so free. I could, like, sing from the mountaintops. And then all of a sudden the turmoil hits again. And you're like, okay. And like I said, from experience, now I know this is just part of it. It's okay. It will pass, but we're going to need to get to the other side while going through it with our spiritual tools, or with our, loving armor.
Yes, yes, yes. I love all of that. And I love that you said the concept of holding it all with love. How do we hold it all with love? Because even as I was speaking about, like, find your community, find your people that can support you in this, that is vitally important. However, what I have learned, and it was a very tricky lesson for me to navigate, but that when you start to find your community, it's very easy to think to yourself, oh, great, well, then I'm just going to kind of leave the rest behind and
Yeah.
just surround myself with this community. But, what I mean by leave the rest behind is like people that you feel like don't get what you're talking about, don't get what you're going through, like, or even like you said, like family connections where you feel like they don't understand me, they don't get me. The greatest gold I have found on my own journey has been leaning into those situations and holding it all with love, not
Mm,
running away from it, leaning into it and saying like,
you're
what
brave.
it's hard.
It
But
is
that's what I'm
hard.
saying. And it's taken me a long time to really
Mhm.
come to terms with that and to find, I guess now, especially that I've learned a lot about like what Gabby talks about with the kind of just it keeps bringing this up because I'm reading her book right now. So there's a lot I've been learning. And it's what's funny is that when the book came out, I was like, I don't need that. I mean, I read all of her books, but I don't think I need this one. And now I'm like
Mhm.
elbow deep in it. And I'm like, oh, I needed this. But what she talks about when she talks about our trauma and like kind of how everybody, no matter who you are, has trauma that you're carrying around from your past, whether you
Mhm.
realize it or not. It has completely shifted my perception of every single human being
Mhm.
in my life experience. Something
Wow.
has switched where I just have this like new level of compassion for people because I look at everyone now and I think, wow, like it sounds so cliche when they say like
Mhm.
everyone's going through something, like don't forget that everyone's going through something. But that honestly has hit me really hard recently where I'm
Yeah.
realizing, wow, we are all trying our best to
Mhm.
navigate our own inner turmoil. And
Mhm.
so some of us have decided to really kind of like try to work through a lot of it. Some of us are really still asleep to it completely
Mhm.
and are just trying to survive.
Mhm.
Like some people are literally just trying to survive all that they feel is weighing them down.
Mhm.
And that has completely shifted my perspective. So I do want to say that in this process, when we talk about finding your people and finding your community, it's so valuable, but also don't run away from the
Mhm.
stuff that feels hard in relationships that matter to you.
Mhm.
So yes, some things, people, relationship situations you should and can let go of when you realize, you know what, this isn't for my highest good.
Mhm.
Totally okay to distance yourself or make those moves. But I would say don't like completely cut yourself off from everything and everyone. Because remember, what we always talk about is the triggers, what we can learn from our triggers.
Yeah.
There people are in our lives for a reason, especially the people that trigger us the most.
And this
Remember
goes,
that.
yeah, this goes back to our boundaries podcast where it's like,
Exactly.
it's a situational intelligence. Like, you know what you're available for. And if the teaching's just not for you at this point, like set a boundary, or if it's not done in a kind way, I
Yes.
think that's really important.
Totally. And so I was thinking, on this topic of shedding layers, like, let's maybe go through some instances where either like we've personally felt like we've had to shed something and what did it feel like after the fact, or like, what was it like while you were in it? Just so we can kind of give people some like tangible tools and ideas or just put some context around what it even means to be shedding layers. So I'll go first if you want.
Right.
So I would say that, so we talked about that, that forcing nature that both of you and I had, right? That was a really tricky one for me to let go of because, like you also pointed out, there was so much control wrapped up in that. And sometimes we try to control things because we are so afraid of what will happen if we don't have control.
Mm-hmm.
And we force a lot of things. If that's in your nature, we force things because it's a level of control. It's an
Yep.
element of control. Like if I make X, Y, and Z happen in my life, then I can feel really proud of that because I controlled that outcome. Right.
And that's
So
what our culture views as successful.
it's successful.
Mhm.
Exactly. So that's what I want to talk about because I just posted about this today about internal peace being the new success.
Amen, sister.
Amen, sister. So when I decided to shed that particular layer in my life, or to start to shed that particular layer in my life, it was very, very challenging for me because I had defined myself so much by the hustler, the doer, the nurturer. All that came with that was control, right?
Mhm.
And so but when I realized it wasn't serving me,
Mhm.
and I started to try, and the ways that I tried to start shedding it was to pay attention. So in those moments where, I don't know, when you almost feel this anxiety where you're like, oh my God, I have to control the situation. I have to like have a say in this outcome, or I have to force this to happen because what would happen if it didn't? Or, you know, I started to start paying attention to those moments when I would feel this like tightness in my chest, and I'd just stop myself and say, like, what are you doing here? You know, like,
Mhm.
do you need to make this happen, or would it be better if you kind of just like took a breath and like waited just to let things play out on their own? Because I was constantly like making things happen without ever giving them the chance to have any other outcome.
Mm.
Right.
Mhm.
So it's almost like you'll never know what better could have happened if you forced it to happen a certain
Yeah.
way.
Right.
And so that was a layer that was very difficult for me to shed. But in time, what I found was that I was able to switch my mode of operation to instead of forcing and yearning for control, trying to give things and circumstances time and space to breathe before I reacted, before I made a decision, before I moved forward with it.
Mhm.
Um, and then in that process, what I started to realize was, oh, things are a lot calmer this way. When I was able to shed that layer of myself and show up more authentically in with a desire for flow and a desire for like the universe to kind of show me what it has in store for me, then there was this like incredible amount of inner peace that I, up to that point, had no idea existed. You know, it's like you don't,
I
and
know
it,
all too
and it,
well.
and
Yeah.
it's similar to what you were just saying, that like the more you do this and the more you start to access that piece, even if it's just like a little bit, you get,
Mhm.
I know addicted is not the word we want to say here, but like you get so this like surge of energy where you're like, oh my God, I need more of that. I need more of that. Cause then
Yes.
you're comparing it too to how you felt
Yeah.
when you were so constricted, when you were forcing and just trying to make everything happen from this controlled place. When
Mhm.
you're able to compare the two, it's incredible the perspective you have and then the desire you have to create more peace.
Amen. Yeah.
So that would be
I totally
my
feel
shedding
that.
story to start with.
Beautiful. Well, yeah, I think that's a really helpful tool and a really helpful example for me and for our listeners, just to put words to these things that we all feel, like I think everybody can identify with the controlling piece because of how much anxiety and depression are out there now. Like it's it's a I don't want to speak too much to that, so I'm going to leave that there. But what I'll say is the shedding piece for me, I'll go back to motherhood because this was such a huge challenge and lesson in my life. And we had the benefit, I look at it now as a gift, to move around a lot, because the moving around, each time we've shed a layer, basically, my husband and I. So we kind of observed our surroundings and the people that we were with, and we observed the environments and how people were speaking and that kind of thing, and we were able to discern like what feels right to us, what feels authentic, what feels like we're just doing this because people around us are doing this. And I think each time we've moved, it has been really beneficial in that sense, where we're peeling back the layers, and getting to what really serves and what's really true. And again, that's different for everybody, but I do think there's a universal thread that kind of goes around, and there's truth to each of us, and we identify that truth. It's like the namaste, right? Like the light in me honors and sees the light in you, and together we are one. I do feel that from meeting so many beautiful people on our path and just being exposed to so many ways of living and different cultures and different perspectives and different political things and social idealations, like it's been very eye-opening for me to be exposed to so much of that, and then being pregnant and having our own son, like being able to have these kind of conversations with my husband of, okay, well, we've had this shared experience of living in Philadelphia, the suburbs of Philadelphia. We've had this shared experience of living in the suburbs of San Francisco and now Seattle. Like, how do we want to take all the good that we've received, not only from family, but from cultural and societal things, and bring it forward to the next generation? And with that comes, incredible generational healing and family systems therapy and all of those things, inner child work, all of these things that we've learned along the way, to now feeling like we can, well, what I want to say is, I want to go back to what you mentioned around that shift in perspective with the reading Happy Days, and really feeling like in your body that sense of compassion that people are hurting. Because for me, I call that a miracle. And before, I would say my miracle mindset was like big earth, like unearthing something huge, or like big life events that went well. And very recently, like within the last year or two, I would say that now my miracle mindset has really been just looking for perspective shifts and emotional regulation in myself. So learning these tools around when I'm triggered, because the triggers will never leave, right? I want to make sure everyone is clear on that. Like, even if you are very grown and you're on your personal journey and you've grown a lot, they're never leaving you. Like, you're always going to have more to learn. So we're lifelong learners, we're lifelong truth seekers, I think, in this community. So that will never go away. However, the blow in which it happens will, it won't take you off your path and like rip you apart for days and weeks and years as much as it did prior to you learning your tools. So I will say that. So for me, the shedding layers was not only looking at who I was and what I was prior to all of these moves around the country, but then also with motherhood, learning how I want to be as close to my core as possible for my son and leave all the bullshit behind. I don't want to teach him a lot about things that I've learned or different things that are not meaningful to me just because they were taught to me. It doesn't mean that they mean something to my soul. So I'm speaking and teaching from what really moves my spirit, and learning real time, simultaneous to that, learning real time for myself, how can I, when I'm triggered, do this internal process, like within seconds, of asking for a miracle, asking for a shift in perspective, asking for the tool that I need at this moment to just regulate my emotions so that I don't lash out and do something I regret or say something I regret, and be able to hold myself in love, knowing that I'm still learning and I'm still on this path.
Oh,
So
that is it. Like, just holding the space and the grace for yourself to
yeah.
say, I'm still learning. Like
Mm-hmm.
that. And, just as you were saying, it's really about the embodiment. I had known for a long time that it mattered that other people have other stuff going on, and that, that other people are hurting. I think I intellectually had the capacity to recognize that, but I had not embodied it, like you said. And that
Mm-hmm.
it really is a miracle, that
It
shift in
is.
perspective, a miracle. Like, here I am, I'm about to be 37 years old, and that has landed for me. And I'm so grateful. I mean, I can't even explain to you like the weight it kind of takes off of me too,
Yeah.
because you're no longer really as defensive towards people and the way that they may act or react, because you're able to see it from a different perspective of like, wait, I don't have to take that personally, because if I can have compassion for what they might be trying to work through within themselves, then I don't have to take that on so personally.
Mm-hmm.
And I love everything that you just said and how you explained that whole shedding experience that you had, and that you've been able to kind of really cocoon yourself in this understanding of, I'm learning, I'm growing. It's okay to let go of some of the things that have been handed to me or taught to me with respect. Like, you're not cutting those things out and saying like, they're inherently bad or wrong. They're just not a good fit for you.
Yeah.
And they're maybe not a good fit for how you want to parent, or, your perspective has changed so much just because of the experience that you've had. And I think that that's an incredible point to make here too, is that if you allow yourself to be open to all different types of experiences, perspectives, ways of seeing the world that are different from all you've ever known, it's incredible what that can do for you in terms of your own inner peace. I mean, it really is. Like, if you just take the steps to start making, stepping outside of your comfort zone a little bit, I think you'll be amazed. And both of us, I think, had that in moving. I mean, I lived on the West Coast only for a year, but I always say that was like one of the most life-changing experiences for me for that reason, because I was taken out of everything I had ever known, 3,000 miles away, where I knew nobody, but we suddenly were experiencing all these incredible new things and looking at all these new places. It looked different. It felt different. Everybody there was different. And that can be a major shock to your system, and it is, but you also can grow in incredibly beautiful ways when you do that, when you put yourself in a situation that's so foreign, or you expand your conversations to be with people that you maybe don't necessarily think you have a lot in common with.
Right.
But anyway, I just think that I'm glad that we were both able to give personal experiences to maybe just start the ball rolling for people as you're listening, of what it means to shed old things or feelings or ways of being, or just this, envision it kind of like as this skin, like a snake sheds its skin, that you're just letting go of anything that doesn't serve you anymore. And you're just moving forward on your own healing and growth path. And eventually another layer is going to shed, and you keep moving and another layer is going to shed. But all the while you're cultivating a greater sense of inner peace, and you're cultivating just more personal freedom for yourself.
And I just want to say one more thing, and I know we're running out of time, but another visual just came through when you were talking about the snake shedding the layers, and I do love that idea, that image. One of the things, it's actually in that card deck that I read earlier, and we'll close with this because it's perfect. We opened with the card deck and we'll close with it. It's the messages from the heart of the divine. So she writes about a ritual with every card that you pull. So the ritual that goes with this is you sit with, and if you're listening and you're sitting and you're not driving, you can do this with us now, but you sit with your eyes closed, with feet on the floor, and you just close your eyes and take a few deep breaths to center and push away anything that's not serving you in this moment. And place your hands on your heart and just sink into your heart space and imagine a flower. Imagine a rose. And that rose, think about the color that you see. And imagine each layer of the petals falling into your lap, one by one. Ever so gracefully and gently, each petal just falls away when it's no longer needed. And as you get closer to the bud, you realize that, oh no, this flower's dead. And that can be scary. And then you realize, as you look closer, that it's a beautiful new bud about to bloom. And just take a few more deep breaths. When you're ready, you can open your eyes and just remember that. That image is so powerful to me because, like I said in this conversation, it can feel like we're dying. It can feel so scary when we leap from one bar to the next in that trapeze image. And when we try to do something new, or when we just try to respond in a different way, like this doesn't, let me be clear, like our conversation today doesn't mean you have to go leave your job or your marriage or anything that's like a complete U-Haul of your life that's not serving you. Like that'll happen if it's meant to in due time. But these things could be moment to moment things that you're just choosing a different way to show up. And like I said, that I've noticed is the miracles, is those things, those little tiny micro moments in our lives that we choose to say something kind instead of something cutting. For me, that's my example, because I got a really
Wow.
quick
That,
wit.
I mean, that visual was amazing.
Oh, good,
I feel like I personally really needed that visual because
good.
that is such a great way of describing how this process leads you to a place, like you said, where you feel like you're literally dying,
Yeah.
but then there's something there underneath that's going to grow and blossom into something even more beautiful, and that
Mhm,
process just keeps happening. Thank you
mhm.
so much for sharing that, because that was beautiful. That was
Yay,
such a perfect way to close this. So
good.
thank you everybody for tuning in today to our conversation on shedding layers. And as always, please reach out at the Wisdom Work on Instagram, or email us at thewisdomwork@gmail.com. We want to hear from you. Please don't be shy. We just love having this community vibe and this ongoing conversation. And we will see you next time on The Wisdom Work.
And come to our retreat on
Oh,
May
yes.
15th.
And come to our retreat, May 15th. Don't forget to
Yes.
sign up for the retreat. You can register. The link's on our Instagram. And we'll also put the link in the show notes here today. That's happening on May 15th, a 2-hour live retreat with me and
Yeah.
Christa, guided meditations, journaling exercises, relax, restore, renew, and we will see you there.
Yeah.